In southwestern Vermont, there is a forest full of lush green vegetation. The tree cover is so tall and thick the rays from the bright sun get strangled by the canopy overhead. Stretching from the Vermont-Massachusetts line to the Canadian border, there is a trail, one that covers over 270 miles, called the Long Trail. Each year, over 2,000 people explore this route. Today, on Weirder After Dark, we're going to explore one section of the trail and dive into the past, the lore, and unsolved mysteries of the Bennington Triangle.
Welcome back to Weirder After Dark, the podcast we get into all things New England weird. My name is Sean, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Kathy.
And Kathy's going to be leading the charge here today. And Kathy, what kind of story do we have?
Ooh, this one is a good one. It's a haunting story.
Ooh.
It's going to leave you feeling a little unsettled. You're going to think maybe you have some answers, but really at the end of it, I think it's just going to leave you with more questions.
I love that. I love that. Before we dive in here today, we just wanted to share with the gang that we are preparing to officially do a little ghost hunt of our own. And we just actually bought a bunch of new equipment that I am so stoked to utilize.
I'm excited.
Yeah, right? We've got some REM pods.
Yep.
We got a spirit box. We also picked up some EMF readers. We're going to take all this equipment.
We also have some dowsing rods.
The dowsing rods.
Yep.
That's right. So we're going to take this equipment and we're going to head over to Chris's office. And if you have not seen it yet, gang, get to our Instagram at Weirder After Dark. There are some creepy whistles. There are some orbs. There are some strange mists going on there. And we're gonna take some time on Saturday night, do a little deep dive.
About the videos, I just want to touch on something. So had a listener reach out and ask if there were vents near the cameras were positioned inside. Yep. Chris, can you answer that? Are there any vents?
So it's a split system, so half inside, half outside for heat and AC, and that's in the way front of the room. So there's no vents in there, and there's no vents near the camera. So
there's no way that's just like a dust cloud that got kicked on from some type of ventilation system or something.
No, I don't think so. I mean, we'll investigate and try to find out. Maybe we'll turn on the system and
test it out.
See what we can find.
Try to debunk it. But got asked that, so I just figured we'd throw that out there.
I love that. Have y'all used a spirit box or REM pods or any of that before?
I've experienced them going to, different like haunted locations, but not like my own personally, where I actually got to like set it up or do anything like that.
Yeah, we got to play around with them when we did the SS Salem.
Oh,
haunting. Yeah, that was cool.
Yep.
That's right. We'll have to tell that story on the pod sometime because that was cool. I'm honestly super excited to go ahead and do this, see if we can find anything. I think it's going to be funny. This will be the first time just the three of us going out trying to do a ghost hunt. So it's inevitably going to be funny and awkward and a hilarious experience. And I just hope we find something. I think it'd be so cool to bring a piece of evidence back. I also want to see, can we try the Estes method with the spirit box? Have you all heard of that? Do you know what that is?
I have no idea.
Okay, so it's super cool. Basically, what happened is whoever has the spirit box, and the spirit box supposedly is picking up frequencies, allowing the spirits to use their energy to say words through like the radio as it's kind of going through. So whoever's using that will have headphones in, be blindfolded, and what will happen is the other two people will be asking questions to the spirits, but the person who has the spirit box can't hear the questions. They can only hear the reaction from the spirits, and they just say out loud what they hear.
Oh, to see if they match up.
Yeah, to see if it matches up.
I like that.
Anything happening, and I think it's spooky, and it's kind of cool, and I want to try it.
I like it.
Yeah.
Spirit boxes, REM pads. I will be bringing a healthy dose of skepticism and logic with me.
We need that. We need that. Well, I'm excited. I can't wait to do that Saturday night, gang. We'll be bringing an update to you in a future episode, or if we get anything real cool, maybe there'll be a bonus pod. But with that, Kathy, let's hear your haunting story.
All right, let's dive in. So nestled in the heart of Vermont lies the eerie and mysterious Bennington Triangle, an area that is made up of Bennington, Woodford, Somerset, and Strathspey. At the very center is the Glastonbury Mountain. This land is now known for its unsolved disappearances and strange occurrences, and was first brought to the world's attention by author Joseph A. Citro, who named it the Bennington Triangle in his book, The Shadow Child. So that's where the name came from.
I want to know why everyone's out there looking for triangles. We got the Bermuda Triangle, we've got the Bridgewater Triangle,
There is
we've
a
got
lot.
the Bennington Triangle.
There's Dragon Triangle, Alaskan Triangle.
These motherfuckers like geometry. What is going on? Why are we living in triangles?
It's crazy. But long before all the mysteries that took place starting in the 1800s, this land held ancient stories. For over 12,000 years, it was the home to the Abenaki people. Their home stretched across Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, into Quebec, and down to Massachusetts. The Abenaki established small villages living off the land and hunting in the forest, but they knew something dark lurked within these lands. The people spoke of the land being cursed, and the curse centered around the steep, dark slopes of the Glastonbury Mountain. They would warn people to never venture too far into the woods. There were places in the forest where they believed the land came to life. The legend spoke of a rock hidden deep within the forest, a rock that was no ordinary stone. According to the Abenaki legend, if a person were to step on it, the ground would shift, and the rock would awaken, and the traveler would become consumed. No trace would remain of them, and the earth would settle back into silence until another victim crossed its path.
Whoa, that is kind of cool. Kathy, are we talking like a rock cryptid that like eats the person, or like a landslide is triggered?
Some people tell the story as a rock cryptid. Some people talk about it as if it's actually the mountain itself.
Gotcha.
Mm.
So it varies. I'm not obviously quite sure what the Abenaki people were referring to, but I kind of interpret it as the land would consume them.
Okay.
Yeah, I could see if people mysteriously went missing on that one particular mountain, the myth of the mountain eating that person or consuming them, that makes sense.
Yeah.
At night, the Abenaki believed the spirits of the land whispered through the trees, calling out to those they left behind. The only reason the Abenaki ever went to Glastonbury Mountain was to bury their dead. So, although they believed the land to be cursed, it was also sacred. It was their final resting place for the spirits. Before the strange disappearances, an unexplained phenomenon that has become what the land is known for today, the Abenaki knew something was wrong in those woods. Could this curse be the reason behind the events that followed? Perhaps, but let's dive deeper and learn more about the strange history of the Bennington Triangle. As the new explorers came and settled the land, the Abenaki's once thriving land began to be taken away from them. Their homes were overtaken, diseases like smallpox wiped out a large percentage of the population, leaving behind only death. Some Abenaki chose to stay and attempt to trade with the settlers, while others fled, but the ones who remained continued the warnings. They shared stories of people vanishing, the chilling cries of the deceased being heard through the trees. These tales were passed down generation to generation, becoming a part of the land, just as the trees and rivers are. In 1761, it is claimed that the then governor of New Hampshire, Benning Wentworth, traveled to this very area. When he returned, he told a brief but unsettling story of his time there. He claimed to have witnessed strange flashing lights in the sky, accompanied by blood-curdling screams coming from the surrounding trees.
When was this?
In 1761?
1760. Okay.
Well,
Lights in the sky, like UFOs, maybe.
That's
and then
what I'm thinking.
Screams? Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not much information is found about Wentworth's encounter, and I mean, I can only imagine why. After all, he's a political figure. Perhaps it wasn't a tale he wanted widely known. By the 1800s, the settlers were continuing to build their homes and towns. The logging industry began to make its mark on the land, and the population was growing. However, this quiet, rural life of New Hampshire soon became something darker. Another story takes place in the area known today as Woodsford. It was dark, pouring rain, and a stagecoach was traveling through. Because of the weather, they had to stop to get a better look at the rocky, muddy road that they were traveling on. As the stagecoach came to a stop, the driver sees some footsteps in the ground that are huge and stretched far too far apart. He asks us if anyone in the coach knows anything about animal tracks. Some of the people get out and they try to help, but as the people get out of the stagecoach, it suddenly was violently shaken and was being banged on and eventually overturned. It was a massive creature unknown to them, leaving the passengers confused and terrified, claiming that this massive creature came out and all they could see was its glowing red eyes.
Ooh, red eyes?
Glowing red eyes.
So Bigfooty? Like, I've never heard Bigfoot with red eyes. Oh, this is creepy.
So they're left stranded with no sign of this unknown creature, except for the terror it left behind. Was it a bear? A wild, undiscovered species like Bigfoot, like you said? No one knows, and there was no evidence that was found at the scene. This story only lives on today because it's being passed from word of mouth.
This is interesting because this predates all the Bigfoot accounts by Americans, right? I think it was Patterson back in the 50s that had the first
video.
Oh, is that the guy with the video?
So crazy, though, that a stagecoach was pushed over, slapped on the side, and then they saw footprints.
That's crazy.
By this time, Vermont was already known for its isolation. But the heart of Bennington Triangle was even more remote. When the story of Mad Tom began to spread, it didn't seem too far-fetched. So Mad Tom was a settler in the town of Woodford, where the locals were mostly hunters and trappers using the wilderness to survive. Some tried farming, but the mountainous land made it difficult, so they relied on the limited crops they were able to grow, making life more challenging. As the legend goes, Mad Tom was well known in the community, but before his death, something changed. His behavior became increasingly erratic. He had violent outbursts, he carried on conversations with himself, and would be seen aimlessly wandering the area in and out of the woods. He was last seen alone, entering the woods. And today, his death remains a mystery. No one knows what happened to him, where he went. It is said that after his disappearance, we can assume he died, because even stranger things began to happen. Locals claim to see Mad Tom's ghost wandering the roads, lost in a restless pattern of his journey in and out of the woods and up and down the roads that he once roamed. It is said that this very town that had driven him mad now holds him captive, trapping his spirit in the land that had consumed his mind.
There's something with these triangles, man. They've got a little bit of everything. This one's got cryptid, ghost, UFOs too. What the hell?
He got eaten by a rock.
Yeah.
When an area becomes connected to the stories that leave people feeling frightened, left with unanswered questions, it's easy for these stories to become something more. While we look for answers, we sometimes start to see what we want. A shadow out of the corner of our eye, an eerie sound that could be the wind, or maybe it's something else. It's easy to write these things off, but there are some mysteries in the Bennington Triangle that are undeniably real. What happens when people vanish, leaving behind no trace, or when they are killed but their murders are never solved, or the cases remain cold for over 80 years. In the early 1890s, a mill worker named Henry McDowell got into a heated argument with a local man, John Crowley. The altercation quickly escalated into a fit of rage, and McDowell grabbed a rock and struck Crowley in the head, killing him. In a state of panic and not wanting to be arrested, McDowell fled to Connecticut, where he was eventually captured and returned to Vermont. But when he confessed, his confession was strange ramblings, and he claimed to hear voices in his head that he said pushed him to commit the murder. The authorities sent McDowell to the Vermont State Asylum in Waterbury, but it gets weirder. He managed to escape.
Yes.
One night, when he convinced a guard to allow him to have some outside time in the court, it was here that he managed to hide into a coal cart, which was headed back to Bennington. But when it arrived, he was gone. He vanished. No trace of him was ever found again.
Wow.
I don't know if that's spooky or if he's just really good.
He's really good, yeah.
Yeah.
So then in 1897, John Harbour, his brother, and a friend set out for the day of hunting. The three men split up when suddenly John's brother heard a loud gunshot and John scream out, "I've been shot!" The two men began to search for John, but it wasn't until almost noon the next day that he had been found lying by a tree with a fatal gunshot to his chest. But what is odd about this is that John hadn't died where he fell. Drag marks led from the spot where he had been shot to the tree where his body was propped up, his loaded gun beside him. But who or what moved him? The authorities questioned John's brother and his friend and found no evidence pointing them to the murder, and it still remains unsolved.
Ooh, that is creepy. So someone moved his body, huh?
Someone moved his body. He was clearly shot. I mean,
Yeah, what would make you do that? That makes no sense.
Is there a chance that he crawled maybe? Or are they saying he was already dead?
It was dragged. So there were drag marks. Yeah. Potentially, maybe there was another hunter in the woods, accidentally shoots him.
Tries to help
him and panics and flees the area. But there wasn't anyone that was ever spotted in that area or anything like that. So,
And plus, it's probably back in these days, it's so much less populated than it is now. And those areas are already not populated.
Yes.
So,
Well, now we're going to jump forward about 50 years to 1945. A year that would mark the beginning of what would become known as the famous 5 of Bennington Triangle. Over the span of 5 years, 5 people disappear or were later found dead under mysterious circumstances, and all of their stories remain unsolved to this day.
Okay, I see why this is going to be weird, these previous stories of missing people.
Kind of leading you. I'm leading you someplace. Okay. You got to kind of come along for the journey sometimes. But before we get to the famous 5, let's start in 1943, just a few years prior. The story of Carl Herrick is one that doesn't quite fit into the puzzle of the famous 5, but his death still raises questions that remain unsolved. Carl, 37 years old at the time, went on a hunting trip with his cousin. The two separated during the outing, agreeing to meet back at the camp later. But as hours passed and Carl never returned, his cousin Henry grew concerned. By the time darkness crept in, Henry decided it was time to contact the authorities, and a search party was formed. 3 days later, Carl's body was discovered, propped up against a tree. His loaded gun was found 70 feet away. The autopsy determined that Carl's cause of death was squeezing.
Wait, what?
That's right, squeezing. His ribs had punctured his lungs, leading to his death. Oddly enough, reports mention bear paw prints around the area where Carl's body was found. The town seemed completely content with the conclusion that a bear had attacked him. But how is this possible that a bear could have squeezed a man to death? It doesn't seem to make much sense to me. He only had a few scratches. His clothes weren't reported to have been ripped. I would think that a bear attack with giant paws and sharp claws and teeth would leave more evidence than just paw prints in the ground.
Yeah, that's strange. And then his body was propped up against a tree too.
Yes.
Which is, I think you're looking at a serial killer maybe.
It's weird. With the bear too, like maybe could the bear like stood on his chest and broke his ribs and punctured his lungs?
Maybe.
But why wouldn't the bear then, like that's easy food at that point in time, right?
Easy food. And if the bear had, because I thought the same thing. So I kind of sat there and was thinking about like a bear attack. How could that happen? But if a bear was pushing down, wouldn't its claws also puncture his body?
Maybe. I'm not sure.
I don't know. And how would it also drag it and prop it against a tree?
Yeah.
That's
weird.
Very strange.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe like stood on him I don't know how he got on the ground or why he's on the ground, but stood on him, broke his ribs, maybe with the gun. He like shot, scared the bear off, and he crawled to the tree.
But the gun was loaded. So it was loaded. No bullets were missing. So he never got a chance to fire. And if he's an experienced hunter, wouldn't he?
You'd think so.
Have an opportunity if he saw a bear charging at him? Wouldn't he be like?
And it's black bears around here too. Like they're scared of humans.
Yeah,
they're not brown bears.
They're not aggressive. Yeah.
Oh yeah, this doesn't make sense.
Now let's move on to the famous five. The first of these happened in 1945. Mitty Rivers, a 74-year-old local guide, took a group of 4 hikers on a trail on the eastern side of Glastonbury Mountain. Mitty had grown up in the area and was known for his knowledge of the land. He was an experienced hunter, extremely familiar with the terrain, but during the hike back to camp, something happened. Mitty told the group, "I'm going to go up ahead and I'll see you there. Just follow the path." He rounded a corner, and when the others arrived at the camp, Mitty was nowhere to be found. A search was launched immediately, but the only thing that was found was a single bullet casing near a river, leading some to wonder if he had fallen in. But if he did, though, where was his body? Where was his belongings? His gun, his clothing? Mitty's gun was never found, so the bullet casing couldn't be positively identified as belonging to him. How could it? It seems odd for the experienced hunter to lose track of his own gear, and even more bizarre that his body just disappeared without a trace.
Really weird for a guide even to be like abandon the people that you're like guiding and being like, hey, I'm going up ahead.
Yeah.
That's strange too.
In my mind, when I read it, honestly, I thought maybe he had to go pee.
Fair. Yeah, fair. That makes sense.
I was like, maybe he was just going to like hop up and like go. And maybe that is what happened.
Go pee in the river and he fell in.
But or he like went into the woods to go behind a tree and then got turned around and got lost maybe. I don't know. And then the fact that they're just assuming that this bullet casing belonged to him. How can you assume that it's his? This is a known hunting area. So,
well, the interesting thing about it is they were on a trail that he felt safe to leave these people on.
Yeah.
And for him to get lost, who is an experienced hunter and experienced woodsman in this area, that part is a little bit weird.
Then, in December 1946, just a year after Mitty vanished, another disappearance shook the area. Paula Weldon, an 18-year-old student at Bennington College, finished her shift at the school cafeteria, told her roommate that she was heading out for a walk on the Long Trail. She left her dorm room around 2:45 in the afternoon and soon was picked up hitchhiking by a man named Lewis Knapp. Lewis later told authorities that he had given a blonde girl with a red Parker a ride to Route 9, a short distance from the entrance of Long Trail. Paula continued her journey on foot, and as she walked, she was spotted by Ernie Whitman. Ernie claimed that he warned her that the weather was getting worse and suggested that she might want to reconsider her walk, especially since it was getting late. Paula thanked him for his advice and carried on her way. She later encountered a group of hikers stopping to chat with them about the trail, and they confirmed that the last time they saw Paula was around 4 in the afternoon. That night, Paula's roommate assumed she was studying late at the library when she didn't return. But by morning, it was clear something was wrong. Paula had not returned, and no one had seen her back on campus. The school organized a search. The search was already difficult due to the terrain. However, it was made even more challenging because overnight, a light layer of snow had fallen, making looking for tracks next to impossible. It's worth mentioning that the search for Paula was so disorganized, with poor communication between towns and mishandling information, that led to a lot of confusion. Because of the lack of coordination in the search, this ultimately led to the Vermont State Police being formed. However, Paula remained missing and still has never been found.
So Vermont didn't have state police before this moment?
Yep. It was because this case was so poorly handled that it was determined that they needed to have a state police.
It sounds like it was a very well-traveled trail. I mean, many people saw her and talked to her. I mean, I know I've been on trails where it's like I could get lost, but this sounds like it's pretty well-traveled and it would be hard to get lost on.
It was the long trail, right?
The long trail.
That's also part of like the Appalachian Trail too. So it's very well walked.
Yeah.
It is weird for a solo, younger female hiker to be like going for a hike and initiating it late in the afternoon. That's a red flag.
There was some different stories that she had a boyfriend and she was going to go run off with a boyfriend. He lived in Canada, but it seems like she was wearing a red parka, jeans, and like white tennis shoes. I feel like somebody, even if you're not from that area, she's attending Bennington College. So she's familiar with like how cold it gets. Like, why? I mean, does she really think she's going to walk all the way to Canada? I don't know. It seems weird. Maybe she just got turned around.
Yeah, weird for a college-educated person to be like, I'm going to walk to Canada at 2 p.m. or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know,
and something else that I read was that I forget what her original major was at school, but she was changing it to like botany.
Okay.
So I was kind of like, when I heard she was going out in the woods, I was like, well, maybe she's going out to go look at plants, like for a project or something, for a class. I don't know. I was trying to think of like, why would she go there?
These types of stories kind of freak me out too, because like the warnings just keep happening, right? It's almost like the world sometimes has a simulation where it's like telling you not to do what you're about to do. It's a bad decision. And, we just ignore it.
Yep. The next story is a little different, but it does happen inside the triangle. This is about James Tedford, a veteran from Franklin, Vermont, found himself at the center of a vanishing act inside the triangle.
Oh, I've heard this story. This is freaky.
Tedford, who had spent years serving in World War II, had returned home to find his life turned upside down. His wife, Pearl, who was much younger than him, had mysteriously disappeared. Neighbors claim to have seen her the day she vanished, heading towards the Amico station in town. But she never made it there, and she was never seen again. No one knows what happened to Pearl, but her disappearance left James heartbroken. He moved into a long-term care facility for veterans in Bennington, trying to rebuild his life. But just a few years later, on December 1st, 1946, 3 years to the date that Paula vanished, after visiting his family in Franklin, he boarded a bus to return to the care facility in Bennington. This wasn't an unusual trip. He'd made this journey countless times visiting family. The bus made its usual stops along the route, and everything seemed normal. But at the last stop before Bennington, something unexplainable happened. There were 14 other passengers on the bus, all of whom confirmed seeing James in his seat, just as he'd been throughout the entire journey. When the bus finally arrived at its destination, James was gone.
Wait, what? And the bus didn't have any other stops?
Yeah.
It had some stops along the way, but everybody that was on the bus said they saw him. He never got off the bus. He stayed there. They saw him. Some people saw him while he was napping. He was reading a map, which I know is later found in his seat. Just vanished.
Just gone.
Gone.
I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah, that's freaky, right? You've been on a long bus ride. You notice people, right?
Yeah.
You have nothing else to do.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm always looking close enough to see, like, did that person get on? Yeah, I feel like I would. You're looking around, you're bored, right?
Yeah.
You're paying attention.
You're like on a bus, and they didn't have phones, so we weren't like glued to our screens.
Yeah.
So there's 14 other passengers on the bus. They all confirmed seeing James in his seat for the entire journey. Now he's gone. His belongings all left behind. His luggage. His wallet is inside his luggage. The map that he'd been seen looking at is left in his seat.
Oh, that's so weird.
And what makes this disappearance even more confusing is that the trip had been delayed due to falling snow, meaning the bus had been on the road for over 8 hours. So during this time, James had been seen never getting off the bus. Where'd he go?
Yeah, if he got off the bus, he would take his luggage with him, right?
Yeah. Some people do think that perhaps his family took him to the bus station and he got off the bus or never went on the bus. But there are witnesses who described him and saw him, the bus driver. They were like, he was on the bus.
So strange.
So very strange.
Did they ever find his body or find him? Oh.
Completely gone.
How could people just go missing? That's crazy. There's so many people just missing. Oh.
I can see in the woods, but you went missing on a bus. Like, where else could you look?
Now we come to a disappearance of an 8-year-old Paul Jepson, who vanished without a trace as well. On December 12th, 1950, Paul was with his mom on their farm not too far from Glastonbury Mountain. They had traveled to the part of the land where they kept their pigs, a familiar place for both of them. The day seemed like any other as Paul's mother moved the pigs from one area of the farm to the next. She left Paul in the car, telling him to stay put and wait for her while she took care of the animals. It was a simple task, brief chore, something she had done countless times before. She was only gone for about 30 to 40 minutes, yet when she returned, Paul was nowhere to be found. The car was empty, and there was no sign of him. No footprints, no evidence of a struggle. What followed was a frantic search. The police searched the entire farm, the nearby dump, the surrounding woods, but there was no sign of Paul anywhere. It was as though the earth itself had maybe swallowed him whole. But then a strange lead emerged. A driver passing through the area claimed that she had saw a boy matching Paul's description walking along the Vermont state line. He was wearing a faded red sweater, a shirt, and brown pants. But when Paul's father was informed of this, he adamantly denied that it was his son. His reaction was not what you would expect. He had a heated argument with the police, insisting they could not question his wife without him being present. And this strange outburst raised suspicion, leaving some to wonder if there's more to the story than the parents are letting on. Did Paul's father know something the police didn't, or was his anger simply the reaction of a distraught parent, desperate to protect his family from scrutiny? Regardless of the tension surrounding the situation, the search continued. But Paul was never found. The lead about the boy on the state line led nowhere, and the police were left with nothing but an unsettling sense that something unnatural may have occurred. Where did he go? Did he walk off on his own? Did he go off on his own, get picked up on the road? Did he end up in the woods? We don't know.
Was there any more context about his anger? Was the anger like, my son wasn't wearing that clothing, like it's not him?
There's a newspaper article that said that she described the boy as having like hair that needed a haircut, and then he's quoted in the newspaper article saying like his hair was long, but it wasn't in need of a haircut. Like it was weird.
That's strange.
It was weird. I'm like, that's what you're focusing on?
Yeah.
Like from reading it, it almost sounded like he was being defensive, saying the boy looked unkept. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And he cares more about that than his missing son. Okay.
I could see your son goes missing and you're defending yourself as a parent. Like people are questioning you, like, why did you leave the kid in the truck so long?
Right.
That's fair.
I also do think it was 1950. I don't think it was uncommon for parents to stay in the car. I'll be right back. I think that probably was more common back then.
I don't think it was neglect, but maybe he saw it as
maybe
people were questioning him as a parent.
You'd still think, though, like if someone said they saw a kid that if it did loosely fit the description of your child and your child's missing, you'd like
want to follow
pour all the resources into that, right? Like, so that's strange.
And again, where did the body go?
The stories sort of changed the more that the family talked to the police.
Don't like that either.
Yeah. And at one point, the father said that the boy had been obsessed about the woods, wanting to go see the mountain, like days leading up to the disappearance. Is that true? Was the little boy like, oh, I want to go to the woods, and then found an opportunity? Because what 8-year-old is going to patiently wait in a car for 40 minutes?
Yeah. Screw you, Dad. I'm going to the woods.
I'm going to the woods. Oh, I'll be back before Mom can get back. And maybe went to the woods. It just got lost. Maybe something more sinister happened. Maybe
Dad was trying to make the investigation go out into the mountains where there wasn't anything.
Yeah. So now we're going to come to the last of the famous five. In the fall of 1950, 53-year-old Frida Langer from North Adams, Massachusetts, set out on a hunting trip with her cousin Herbert Lessner and her husband Max. The trio set up camp near the Somerset Reservoir. Once the camp was all set up, Frida and Herbert decided to take a walk along one of the trails that would wind through the forest. While out exploring, the two stopped at a stream, and as Frida ventured too close to the water, she lost her footing and she fell in, getting completely soaked. Being an experienced hiker and knowing their campsite was not far away, Frida told her cousin just to wait by the stream while she ran back to camp, should change her clothes, should come back. Hubert waited patiently, but as the minutes passed and then hours passed, he grew concerned and decided to head back to camp himself. When he arrived, he was met with unsettling news. Max hadn't seen Frida. She never returned to camp. The two men immediately notified authorities, and what ensued was nothing short of a full-scale operation. Helicopters circled the sky, planes flew over the mountain range, and the state police organized a search that included about 50 nearby campers. They combed the area around the Somerset Reservoir, fearing that Frida had somehow fallen into the water. Yet, despite the massive efforts, there were no signs of her, until 6 months later. On May 12, 1951, an unexpected breakthrough came. Two fishermen casting their lines near the Somerset Reservoir stumbled upon something that would finally end the search. It was Frida's remains. It was found just above the flood dam, only 3.5 miles from the campsite. But the discovery raised more questions than answers. Frida's body was so severely decomposed that an autopsy was impossible. Authorities quickly concluded that her death was an accidental drowning, but she was so decomposed, they're just guessing. Also, the area around the reservoir had been searched thoroughly by both professionals and volunteers. There was no sign of her anywhere near the water in the search teams that had covered the entire area extensively. So how could they have missed her? If she had fallen into the reservoir, why didn't the searchers find her body in the weeks and months following her disappearance? How did her remains end up where they did, so far from the stream where she had originally fallen in with her cousin, and in an area that they had already searched? Frida's case, like the others in the Bennington Triangle, continues to baffle people. What forces are at play in this stretch of land, and why do so many disappearances in this area seem to evade all logic, leaving only questions behind? The Bennington Triangle is an eerie place where people have disappeared under the strangest of circumstances, leaving behind more questions than answers. But there's one story that stands out amongst the others, a story told by Robert Singley, a Bennington college student who disappeared in 2008. Yet he lives to tell his experience. Robert, 27 at the time, had set out on a solo hike, hoping nature would inspire the music he was composing for a string quartet. Despite being an experienced hiker, Robert didn't bring a GPS, compass, or map, just a headlamp.
Do we know if it's like a night hike or day hike or?
I believe it was during the day.
Okay. All right.
Which I think is weird that he brought a headlamp.
That's definitely one of the survival pieces that just in case you come back later, especially being September, it gets dark early, like really good piece of equipment, all of the other stuff not having that. That's not good.
He set out from Harbor Road in Woodford Hollow, the same area where Paula Weldon had gone missing decades earlier. Robert reached the top of Bald Mountain, had lunch, and then ventured along the ridge towards Glastonbury Mountain. But somewhere along the way, he lost his trail. He kept walking, but the further he went, the more disorientated he became. Robert described the moment he lost his way as a strange, dizzying experience where everything crescended into this weird sort of disorientated confusion. Suddenly, the fog rolled in and it got dark. At that point, Robert realized he was lost. He pulled out his headlamp, but it stopped working. Worse, the rain began to pour down, and as temperatures dropped, Robert feared he might fall victim to hypothermia. Then, something even stranger happened. He claimed to have felt a powerful pull towards a particular maple tree. A feeling he described as a haunting energy surrounded him as he struggled to find his bearings. He began to gather sticks and brush to try to make a small fire under the cover of the giant maple tree, but as you could guess, the sheets of rain made it impossible. Robert also noted that while searching for kindling, he came across some animal bones, which only added to the eerie energy radiating throughout the night. Despite his fear and confusion, Robert waited, hoping the weather would pass. By 11 p.m., Robert's girlfriend called authorities, worried because he hadn't returned from his hike. The police found his car at the trailhead, but couldn't search the woods safely due to the dense fog. As morning arrived, Robert tried to head towards his car, but ended up 6 or 7 miles off course near Goddard Shelter on the peak of Glastonbury Mountain, an area he had camped in before. The spot was nowhere near where he thought he was supposed to be. As he made his way back towards the maple tree, the area appeared completely different. There was now a fallen tree that he hadn't noticed before, and nothing looked as it had the night before. There was no small pile made in the attempt to build a fire, and he was unable to locate any of the animal bones he had seen. Fortunately, the state police were actively searching for him. The tracking dogs picked up his scent, and by 11:30 a.m., Robert was found. Shaken, scared, but he was unharmed. Robert's experience adds an intriguing layer to this mystery of the Bennington Triangle. He claims to have felt as if he had been taken through some sort of portal through time and space. Could this bizarre experience explain the disappearance of others in the triangle? Was Robert somehow pulled into a different time or dimension like the ancient legends of the Abenaki people suggest? Abenaki spoke of a man-eating rock said to consume anyone who stepped into it. Some believe this curse may be tied to the mountain itself, perhaps acting as a kind of portal that swallows people into another reality. But if that's the case, then why was Robert spared, while so many others were lost forever? Did the mountain decide to return him to his own timeline, or was something else at play? Something more sinister than we could imagine? This could be the last piece of the puzzle in the Bennington Triangle, a glimpse into something much darker that still lurks beneath the forest canopy. But there are still more questions than answers. What is the true nature of the land? Is it cursed, haunted, or simply a place of ancient power like the Abenaki once warned?
That's a crazy story. I can't believe all the different missing occurrences that happen in this area. That's
crazy.
They
almost come full circle, right? The Abenaki myth about the mountain eating people and then the missing people and then this experience with this guy's in this other realm or dimension. as he's hiking in the woods.
Yeah. Thinking of Frida, they search that area.
Yeah.
So people, you might think like, could she perhaps have been taken through a portal and then maybe brought back?
Portal stuff just seems a little too fantastical for me. I can just really think of Robert's experience and like, Chris, we've gone hiking, right? We went up into the White Mountains. Imagine that. Imagine being out there, not a ton of people around. You can see how people can get like lost. Even going off trail. I've gone solo hiking and many times I've been like, oh man, I haven't seen a trail marker in a while. Am I going down the right path? Or like you have like drainage ditches where like the water runoff is coming down from a mountain that looks exactly like the path that you're walking on. And next thing you know, you're walking up it and you're like, holy shit, what's going on? Like I can totally see someone getting twisted around and then the panic sets in, the emotional part sets in. You find your maple tree, you think you built a fire and maybe you think you know what it looks like. And then when you find your way back, you're someplace completely different. And you're like, I think that's where I was. I think this looks familiar, but you're so twisted in that. Like I could see all that happening.
I agree with you.
Have you ever noticed, as soon as it gets dark, the woods look completely different.
So different.
It's so easy to get turned around.
Yeah.
I get lost and turn around in the woods in my backyard. So, I mean.
And I don't want to be this guy.
This would be terrifying.
But he's a music student from Vermont going looking for inspiration in the woods. Was he doing some magic mushrooms?
Maybe. Who knows?
I mean, once I did shrooms and got lost in my backyard, so.
Hey, if that's a real story, that's hilarious.
That's a real story.
We'll have to dig into that some other time. I will say, though, that like I think you made a pretty compelling case, though, Kathy. Like, okay, can I explain away the getting lost in the woods and the portal thing? Yeah, I feel like I can. But what are the chances that within 5 years?
Within 5 years.
5 different people going completely missing. That's weird.
Yeah.
And then you gave us some great historical context about the area as well,
and that
too.
all happened in kind of a cluster as well.
Yeah.
And then there was sort of like nothing. And then there's another cluster. And then was nothing. And unfortunately, the 2008 story was the only one that I could find of recent times. So I don't really have anything to...
Yeah.
It would have been better if I could find something, again, more recent to sort of go with the 2008 story. Me personally, I don't really think that it was a portal. Sorry, guys, but I don't believe in Bigfoot.
I mean, you're not scared of Bigfoot. We figured that out in the Bridgewater Triangle episode.
So I think that each of these cases are tragic individual cases that can be explained.
So you think people are just creating this triangle in Bennington as an explanation to link everything together to help them feel like they're getting closer to an answer?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think that's just human nature. I think that's just what we do.
Yeah.
Any one of these cases in isolation, I could explain away. But when you tell all these cases all at once, it feels like there's something else to it. It really does.
At the end of the day, we have a bunch of missing people, Bigfoot, UFOs, like bunch of strange occurrences in the same area.
Yeah.
Yeah, you take any 3 points in space and I will make a triangle for you. That being said, we really have to watch this space going forward to see if there's more strange occurrences. It's fascinating to me that Bennington Triangle, Bridgewater Triangle, Bermuda Triangle, the Triangle in Alaska, all these areas all have higher than normal incidences.
All right, Kathy, thank you so much for that story. And to the gang, if you enjoyed Kathy's story here today, first thing you got to do is visit our Instagram. We're going to go ahead there. We'll make sure that there are some images and some supporting information for the Bennington Triangle. On top of that, we want to remind you that we are always on the lookout for strange tales in New England. So if you got anything weird, anything strange, anything creepy going on that has happened to you in or even outside of New England, we want to hear your tale. So go ahead and send that to us, and you can email us at thegang@weirderafterdark.com. And lastly, we want to let you know that we are building some communities out there. So if you are on Reddit, if you are on Facebook, or as we already said, Instagram, find us at Weirder After Dark. Come interact with us and some other listeners. As always, if you like this shit, if you're loving this shit, like it, subscribe, and send it to someone that you know that might also be interested. That would help us and mean the world. And remember, it always gets a little weirder after dark.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.